Okay, so I wanted to go over this 2021 housing market crash by Meet Kevin. Now, to be honest, I was expecting pretty much what he called a lot of the doom and gloom, which we have been seeing. This has been going on for a couple of years prior to this whole pandemic of this year. This goes back to 2017, 2018 is really when it really started becoming something that was a bit popular and growing. And of course, with all the lockdowns and everything, this has been called for everywhere. We're going to have a housing crash. We're going to relive these salt wounds that we just went through only just over a decade ago when everything else crashed. And this has been a theme that's been going on, and this theme is complete bull. There's nothing that deeper than a superficial level relates this current situation, and we're going to go over this even with these fake lockdowns, that can even compare to the catastrophe and the perfect storm that it was 11, 12 years ago. Now, I'm going to get into this here. I haven't seen other Kevin's videos. I'm a fan of his on real estate crises and crashes. I've seen that he's had a couple of them. I haven't seen the rest of them. I picked this one in particular. And if this one is anything like the other ones, Kevin actually, in my opinion, certainly gets it, because I'm saying there's not going to be a housing crash. There isn't going to be, and I'm going to back it up. And the majority of what he goes through unexpectedly, because I wasn't expecting it, in this video is he's along the same lines, which is it's a contrarian point of view to everybody else, because it's very easy to look at everything right now and say it's going to crash, and the same thing with the stock market. Now, I'm leaving the stock market out of it for this, but this is a residential housing crash video review analysis. You can go search them yourself, just to put this on the record that they're all over the place. The doom and gloom, the market's crashing. Of course, you notice now a lot of them are starting to say 2021. If you go back into each one of their channels, they're going to say 2020. This is the type of nonsense where they're not doing the proper analysis. First thing I want to do is I want to be able to quantify what we would call a crash. Crash can mean different things to different people, and most of the time there's never really a percent ever put on it. But I want to be able to put a percent on it so I can be quite clear. This doesn't mean that there can't be some markets where we can call they're a downtick or even a decline. I've put down some subjective numbers here of 0 to 5% or 5 to 30% for a serious decline. Now, and then a crash being over 30%. But I have no problem adjusting this. We can change this to let's at least say 25. Let's be honest. If we're talking about a crash is a serious crash. It's not a decline. It's not a downtick. So I'm not saying some of those things aren't possible in some markets. I tend to lean towards things flattening out and maybe just within a 5%, again, depending on the market. There's markets where right now that are the non-far left markets, they're going up. But this, I want to be able to say a crash is at least 25% loss. So this way we have at least a factor there that we can judge against, instead of keeping this so subjective that these videos which other people put out, in the end, they're just BS and they're meaningless. So what are the reasons for the housing crash? Well, it's pretty obvious. It's all about primarily the pandemic. We have lockdowns. We have I don't know if it's officially a depression. You have to have a certain number of low GDP over a number of quarters, but you ask all the tens of millions of families out there and people that are feeling it. I mean, there's a depression out there that's pretty serious. I'm going to use that as a small d, not a capital D. Shock to your savings. We already know about 80% of people live off of paycheck to paycheck, which we're going to get into in some other videos. It's really your own fault if you're living paycheck to paycheck, and we will explain why that is. Primarily is maybe think about this. You might be responsible for yourself. How about that? Unemployment. Unemployment is at 7.9 million. Now, this is more than double than it was a year ago, but if we get into the trend, if I can find it, here's our trend. 3.5, 3.6%. Just unbelievable low unemployment. Obviously uptick in March, and then lockdown against your freedoms and insanity happens in April. But look at this steady decline here. This is every month. Okay, so there's a part here where I think this clearly it'll bottom out. It's clearly, it's not going to go back down to 4.4 when we're about to go into the winter, and we have insane government officials who take this as a religion, and they take it as an opportunity just to beat down and show their power. I mean, there's no other way around it, because if you actually look at the statistics, the real statistics, the death statistics of this alleged, this sickness, there's a real sickness there. Okay, it's a fraction of the flu, and there's no reason for justification in this other than it has turned into its own religion. And just remember, people that are very extreme in religion, which is really a cult, are dangerous mofos, and you need to stay away from them. This will bottom out here, I think, within the next month or two. It's got to be at least 6.5% is my guess, for a couple of reasons. Namely, also, like I said, is we're going to go into the winter here. Flu cases, other people getting sick, are going to be miscategorized as COVID cases. Of course, they don't talk about COVID death anymore. I'm not getting into that. Anybody here who has taken the red pill knows that 99% of this is a total sham. But the sham is the reality. So this is going to come down a little bit more, and it's going to bottom out, this is a far cry of, it's going to go down to about 50% of what it was after April. Shock to savings. Clearly, that's what happens when people lose their jobs. This is a big impact. We're already living a paycheck-to-paycheck nation for almost 80% of the people, and this has only made it even worse. We just went over the unemployment. Mortgage defaults are 5 times higher than they were year over year. So there's no surprise, really, I think, with that, after having going through these lockdowns, and lockdown of the whole world in many respects. It's just something that's so unprecedented. There's no way it can't have an effect. To be honest, I don't know why this is even higher. So let's move on. Foreclosure moratoriums are still in effect, so people will say that at some point the moratoriums, they have to end. Right now, for any federally mortgage-backed mortgages, they are in effect till 12/31. Who knows? There might be an extension of that. There could be other stimulus, which it's actually insane. That's another topic for another video. But these types of bailouts, consumer bailouts, Federal Reserve Bank bailouts, stock market, government debt bailouts are not going to stop. They're going to go on. They're absolutely out of control. But the point is here from other people is that there's a certain point where the foreclosures have to happen. There's no question about that. So this is part of their reasoning for the housing crash. And future lockdowns, the Great Reset, which is this global technocratic attempt of centralized authority, which is just absolutely pure evil. It's very interesting how those people that support this have shifted this paradigm. We always had everything tied up into Marxism and fascism, two sides of the same coin, always tied up to a person. It was a Chairman Mao, it was Mao Zedong, never said his name right, Joe Stalin, Hitler, on and on and on. These guys go, especially the ones in Vietnam. Those are some particularly brutal bastards out of Khmer Rouge. A lot of it was always tied to a particular person, right? We had the cult of personality. It's all changed now. It's all about a movement. So this way that person comes and goes, they don't actually get tied to it, and the movement keeps going on, which is pretty ingenious. But anyway, part of the pandemic is that the argument is that there's going to be future lockdowns, and things they're going to get worse, certainly if the anti-business person gets into the White House. You're not going to almost double corporate tax, increase taxes on personal income tax across the board, which is going to happen. People, you're going to you can sit there and believe that there's somehow you're going to pay the rich are going to pay more and no one else is. I mean, I don't know how you could even attempt to believe that. But anyone that can even think about raising taxes while we're going through this should be locked up and put in a jail. Cuomo, who's as far left as you can go, has been on record a number of times saying something that's a bit shocking coming from that side, and said he would not be in favor of increasing taxes at all, especially on the rich, because of what do you think happens? They're going to get up and they're going to go. And particularly, it's the worst time of doing that. You're just going through a lockdown, and this makes absolutely no sense to pour fuel or pour gas on a fire that you've already lit. So these are the reasons for it, but let's move on. The reasons against the housing crash. Okay, so the first reason here, it might seem silly, but just hear me through. This is what I call the Ricky Roma effect. So those of you who are, like myself, big fans of Glengarry Glen Ross, Ricky Roma goes in there and says to James Link, if everybody says one thing, I say bet the other way. And of course James Link says, added to which they're wrong. And Ricky of course says, well, that's what I'm saying. Well, you know what? That's what I'm saying. And if you think that's a bit silly, how about what is the most famous investment advice? And what about the most famous investment advice by the most famous investor, Warren Buffett? Okay, his most famous quote is a contrarian vote as well. It's the Ricky Roma effect. It is, when everyone's greedy, be fearful, and when everyone else is fearful, be greedy. It's a contrarian. It's just one of those things. We've seen this all over the place, that everyone's calling for this. Think about that. How many often have you seen YouTube videos or news, especially the big news outlets, who keep calling for something? Okay, so now let's go into this. Low interest rates are not going away. They're not going away. I mean, we have central banks around the world talking about negative interest rates. I mean, that's how far it is that they're not going away. Bank of England is trying to get preparation for support of negative interest rates in the UK, if in case they pull the trigger on that. Now Powell here has said that he's not going to do that here. I'm just telling you, there's interest rates are not going up. They're not going up for years. Okay, and when interest rates go up, a lot of the lending it goes in the reverse. So right now they just can't be any better, and they're not going to go anywhere because the Fed's trying to spur an economy, which is absolutely ridiculous because we're still in a type of lockdown. How do you try and spur an economy when the government or half the government are actually still trying to lock things down from this cult of COVID? It's not happening. Anyway, so you don't have to worry about that. Unemployment, I showed you, it's trending down. It's going to bottom out here real soon, but it's not the same numbers as it was before. Another point here, and Kevin mentioned this, is that largely those who are unemployed are in the lower end and lower skilled wage earners. It's just the truth. A lot of them is, servers in the server industry, the restaurant, retail industry, travel industry. Majority of these people don't own homes. They're not going to be the majority of them being at a financial risk of losing their home and not being able to pay their mortgage. So you hear these numbers, these unemployment numbers, but who are the majority of the demographics of those people within that number? And that's right there. Serious defaults have been trending down. We have some info. Okay, so here's some Black Knight's mortgage data. The number of seriously delinquent mortgages 90 plus days over fell by 43,000 in September, marking the first such improvement in serious delinquencies since the start of the pandemic. More than 2.3 million homeowners, 5 times the number entering 2020, got it, understood, remain 90 or more days past due but not in foreclosure. The delinquency rate fell month over month. Early stage delinquencies continue to show strong improvement, with rolls from current to 30 days delinquent, as well as the number of borrowers less than 90 days delinquent having returned to pre-pandemic levels. Now, some of this has to do with different homeowners taking advantage of these different forbearance and moratoriums. I took advantage of them myself, not knowing what was going on. You had an opportunity to take 3 months worth of, or more, 3 months worth of mortgage payments and throw that money under the mattress. I mean, we've never seen this before. And of course it's a disaster and it's unneeded, but that's a different discussion. Seeing a total lockdown, having people locked in their homes, I mean, I tell you what, I wasn't worried about my credit rating at that moment. I was worried about the security of my home for myself and for my family. So I pulled the trigger on that thing. There was no evidence that needed to be done. So for having the forbearance for 3 months, and I just took it, and then been paying ever since. But hey, man, tack it back on to the end of a 30-year mortgage. What the hell is that going to be worth in terms of inflation over the next 20 to 25 years? It's going to be worthless. It means more money now. So especially strategizing how to survive and secure yourself as much as you can, considering that governments are out of control. Okay, so then also got into the foreclosure moratoriums used by people now who didn't need them. We took the forbearance, didn't need it, did it as a precautionary measure. There are people who are doing the foreclosure moratoriums who are doing the same thing. Now they've gone the next step and gone beyond the forbearance part and then gone into a foreclosure part where your credit is being affected. But some people are taking advantage of that, and hopefully they're at least doing the right thing, which is taking their money and stocking it away to help build up a nest egg that hopefully they already had. But at some point, these are going to come through. We're going to have some foreclosures, but that's okay as we get to the lower bullet points, and you'll see why. The other part, migrations from leftist cities. I don't know, for some reason, people pretend on YouTube like they don't understand where and why and these migrations are happening. They're not happening from large cities. This is bull. They're happening from large leftist cities because the leftist cities are completely enjoy the lockdowns. They enjoy the control and the beatdown of the people. There's something about the ideology of that makes you want to be able to control and centralize power. It's just the point of view. It's the ideology from where you're coming through, which is why we're going to have a tough time economically next year. But if the pro-Marxist gets in the election and they're going to raise taxes, I'm telling you, it's going to be a tough time, because no one in their right brain, in their right mind, would ever even think about raising any taxes, especially corporate income tax, especially personal income tax, especially capital gains tax. They're going to tax every damn thing across the board, and they're going to tax the middle class. And to be able to do that while we're going through this, I mean, these people should be locked up. Like I already mentioned it before, but even psychopath Cuomo wouldn't even dare do that in his New York. Even he knows, like, that's just a stupid idea. But these migrations, what does this mean in terms of the housing market? Well, go and look at the housing market in these areas, the suburbs of New York City. This is not uncommon. People are getting 30 or 40 different offers for their home. So the churn and burn on these houses that are being sold and people looking to move and migrate, they're not being left on the market at all. They're being put up, and they're actually selling many of these at a premium. Now, I understand that the suburbs of New York is not a reflection of the entire country, but if you look at certain volume, it has some significant effects when we look at regional areas, which is part of what you got to do in looking at residential real estate, because there's the whole picture of the U.S., but we all know it varies so much, depending on the region, depending on the state, depending on the city, depending on the type of housing it is. Is it in city? Is it suburb? Is it rural? And so on. But it's just an indication that they're being sold. They're being bought and they're being sold. And we have the same feedback from realtors in these primarily non-leftist states like Texas and Tennessee and Florida and Arizona. There's Nevada. They don't have that full hardcore Marxist mindset. And these people, if you put your home on there, you can sell it right now, because it's all getting down into the second to last item here, which is really one of the most important parts here of why there's not going to be a housing crash, is that the month-to-month housing inventory is unbelievably low. Look at this. This is shockingly low, and I had this down here as the fifth bullet point. It could probably be even the first one. Monthly supply of houses in the U.S. Right? Of course, here's the big, huge glut of post the GFC and everything crashing. It's not only a superfluous, unbelievable amount of houses for sale. It's combined with banks that won't lend, and it's combined with people that are totally broke. I mean, talk about a 3-time whammy. This was unbelievable. But look at where this is right now. 3.4. Are you kidding me? Look at this. This is the last time it was here is about 17 years ago. That is at the bottom. And this is going back over 40 years. Do you want to go even a little further? 50 years. It's still beating it out. It's still beating it out. Look at that. That's like getting Mike Tyson right there in the face. You want to know the biggest key? That's it right here. I put down all these other bullet points. This is the number one reason. And when houses go for foreclosure, they'll kick up a little bit, but this is so low, they're not going to be not absorbed by buyers. This is the huge key right here. We have the same thing where we don't have enough housing for rentals, for renters, and that's going to continue for another decade. Okay, but this has caused such an unbelievable glut, or lack of glut, sorry. This goes back to April, and look what happened here. So there's some regular, we have some regular movements here. Things slow down a bit during the winter, and then usually they start to pick up. And people are not selling. So there's the whole part of the migration parts that I just wanted to show that where people are moving and willing to migrate, and that takes a lot of money to be able to do that. And there's a lot of willingness to do that. And then there's a whole bunch of other people who are just completely staying put. They're not buying homes, but they're not selling them either. And this cannot be stated enough. And this is probably the number one reason why you're not going to have a housing crash in 2021. If you've heard it here, I'm not don't own tens of millions of dollars. I'm just using a little bit of analysis across the board here for some things that make sense to me. And then lastly, Here's the thing that makes the difference. When people are talking about crash, they're still talking about, in their mind, the 2008 thing. Of course, prior to 2008, no one was talking about a crash, which is why it happened. It's the Ricky Roma effect. Okay? Here's the other thing. Everything changed in terms of the due diligence and requirements that are needed for banks on who they're going to give mortgages to. Okay, in the 2000s, they gave anybody with a heartbeat a mortgage. I got 3 mortgages when I wasn't even renting out the other 2. I mean, that's just insane. That doesn't make any sense. But I was given 3 mortgages. I was able to get rid of them in a good way where I didn't get. I actually made out. That's a whole other different strategy. I just had to twist and turn, especially on my original property, which dropped 46% from a peak in 2007 to where it was 2009. 2 years later, it dropped 46%. Now I was able to exit and evacuate that without getting burned at all. In fact, I made it work out for me. But that wasn't the plan, was it? No, that wasn't the plan at all. But this is the thing: the average subprime, huge amount of portion of the industry, of course, combined with mortgage-backed securities and other derivatives that were through the roof, which were pyramiding on itself and pyramiding more, was something that we haven't seen. And does that scenario exist right now? Not at all. Not completely at all. Not even close. Those are the 2 big things. You want a 1-2 punch on here on why this isn't going to happen? This is the first reason. The inventory is the lowest it's been in 50 years or longer. And it's not going to automatically change and jump way so high, even on foreclosures, when we're this low. It's not. We have people wanting to buy. We still have people with these low interest rates, right, up here. These low interest rates, including myself, people who are looking for buying properties, who are, because of these rates, are going to want to be able to get in, and we can't even find the inventory to find the right houses right now, and that's not going to be blown out of the water in January when some foreclosures start coming in. It'll have an effect like anything else. It's just not going to have the big global or national effect. And the other thing is the average person isn't as much a deadbeat as they were on average as they were 15 years ago. I'm sorry, it is. Too many deadbeats got mortgages, and then other times they gave people who didn't deserve that many mortgages, which included myself. They gave me more mortgages, and only because I'm responsible, I was able to back out of them, which is its own miracle. But anyway, following up with Kevin, really good analysis there. Like that he went against the grain, and he actually used some thought on that. But the thing is the 2 big parts that he did not talk about, which are the most important, are these final 2. Again, mark my words, 2021, there's no housing crash. There is no housing crash. It's not happening. There can be, in some markets, a little bit of an adjustment. There's not going to be a crash. So knowing that, it might be a good time, wherever you find it right, to realize, well, if you're going to wait for a crash for you to invest, you're going to be waiting for quite a while. And until then, be seeing you